In this video, I'm going to show exactly how my box joint jigs work. In this case, I've got my ultimate box joint jig here. I've had a lot of people make it and they still don't really understand how it works. Basically, the way it works is you need a saw blade that cuts a curve that matches the tooth spacing in the rod that you've used in the jig. In this jig, as built as designed, it uses a 1-inch threaded rod that has a tooth spacing of 1/8 of an inch per tooth. So you need a 1/8 of an inch thick blade. Either that or you need a combination of two blades that will cut 1/8 of an inch wide curves. I have two blades here that are 8 1/4, and when I put them together on the saw, they will cut that 1/8 of an inch curve. Now, just for the sake of demonstration, I have a thinner blade in the saw here. This is actually a 7 1/4 inch blade that you would use on a circular saw. And the beauty of this is it's a very thin curve, so it will cut a curve that's about 1/16 of an inch wide. So I'll be able to make 1/16 of an inch box joints with that blade. However, before I get started on that, I just want to point out one thing about the jig that's very important before you get going. After you've built it, you have to make sure that the carriage slides correctly. It should slide easily like this with very little effort. It doesn't need to be very stiff on there because you're holding it in position once you lock that bar down. In the plans and in the instructions, I say use Vaseline on the inside here. And that's what I did here. Now, if you find that it's starting to get stiff over time, that means that the Vaseline inside has either dried up a little bit or has picked up a little bit of fine dust. Then what you would need to do, or you can do, is take a paper towel, soak it with something like mineral spirits, and then just wipe that off, wipe it clean, and then put on a fresh layer. But I've had this going for more than a year now, and mine is still smooth. Okay, the first step is to return the jig to the start position. Just right here. You can line it up and see where it is. Now I've got my stock. I'm just going to put it up against the side fence. I'm not going to bother to space it out. I went over that before. That if you want to space one piece, you can. It's not a problem, but I find it much easier to not space the wood and just cut the parts to the right width afterwards, you know, using wider stock to begin with. So I'm going to clamp this in here, and then after it's clamped in, I'm going to make sure that it clears, it rolls smoothly across, it doesn't get hung up on anything, because you don't want it getting snagged on something. If your zero clearance insert here is a bit high, now's the time to adjust it. Another thing is the saw that you're working on here has to be running well. The curve that it's cutting has to be the right size. That means that if your saw has excessive run out, that means wobble when the blade's in there, you have to correct that problem. Either that or use a different saw, because that's a situation that's not acceptable for any kind of operation that you're going to be doing that requires any kind of precision. I've got my carriage brought back to the start position. I'm ready to make my first cut. I'm going to lock the carriage with the locking bar here, push it through, and then I'm going to advance it one click. And one click will move the carriage 1/8 of an inch. Then I'll make another cut. And that's what I need to make for a 1/16 inch box joint. Okay, all done with the cuts. And if my blade is the right thickness, which I'm pretty sure it is because I've tried this one before, then these will go together without any problem. And they do. I'll get a picture of this in close. so you can see how tight the fingers are. Now I'm putting in the 1/8 inch blade to do a sample of that, but if you find that your blade is cutting just a little bit too tight, what you can do is you can shim the blade a little bit on one side. You slip the blade in, and then you slip a slip of paper or a doubled up piece of paper, however much it takes to get that blade to wobble just a little bit to widen out the cut. That is perfectly safe to do. There won't be any problem doing that. I've done that myself, actually. No problem doing it. As long as you don't go overboard with it, like shove a piece of wood in there or something that really makes it wobble. Okay, I finished putting the blade in. I got everything set up here, ready to start cutting again. The way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to make one cut, and then I'm going to advance the carriage 2 clicks and make another cut. Those 2 clicks are 1/4 of an inch. 1/8 of an inch per click. So 2 clicks, we'll move it over 1/4 inch. I'll make another cut. So that'll leave 1/8 of an inch between the cuts. Okay, so as you can see, a nice tight joint. The wood that I'm using here is less than desirable, but has a hole there, but it goes together perfectly. Just enough room in there for glue, and the blade I'm using is flat on the top, so it makes nice flat top joints. Okay, I wanted to keep this one quick, so I'll wrap it up here. Basically, what you're shooting for is to make sure that your blade, what your blade is cutting, matches your threaded rod, the tooth pitch on your threaded rod. This threaded rod has a 1/8 inch tooth pitch. That's how wide a kerf this blade should be cutting. Fortunately, it's not a problem to find that size blade. And also, like I said, you can stack 2 smaller ones, thinner ones. Also use paper shims, whatever it takes. Just when you find that magical combination, then you want to write that down and keep it for the next time you want to cut that joint. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was informative for the people that are building this jig. Also, if you have questions or comments or concerns, I have a forum thread set up on the website forum, and there's a link to that in the description of this video. It's also in the build article. I would urge everyone that's making this jig not just to go by the plans and the videos, but also read thoroughly the build article. I included a lot of detail in there that really is pertinent to the build. It's not just filler for the article. It's something you should go through.